Okay, let's begin. Good morning and welcome to AARP's Coffee and Conversation. I am your host, Karen Ulmer Dorsch, a volunteer for AARP New Hampshire. Co-hosting with me this morning is Beverly Cotton, also a volunteer. And please note that we are recording, as Beverly told you. Before we get started, I'd like to cover a few housekeeping items. In an effort to eliminate background noise, please be sure that you are on mute, which I think you all have done. We'd love to hear from you this morning, though, so if you would like to ask a question, please use the chat box, which can be accessed by clicking the chat button. Our fellow volunteer, Mary Roberge, will be monitoring that until she comes in to join us. Jeannie Tucker will be doing that. And she'll be raising your questions for us throughout the program. At AARP, we have been promoting the health and well-being of older Americans for over 60 years. And in the face of the coronavirus pandemic, AARP is providing information, advocacy, and resources to help older people and those caring for them protect themselves from the virus, prevent it from spreading to others, and cope with the health problems and the financial disruptions caused by the virus. Joining our conversation this morning is Laurie Terwilliger. Laurie Terwilliger is a registered dietitian nutritionist who works part-time at Health First Family Care Center. Laurie holds a Bachelor of Science degree in zoology from San Diego State University and a Master of Science degree in zoology from Washington State University. After working as a field biologist and a science teacher, Laurie applied her extensive science background to the study of nutrition. She completed her dietetics coursework at the University of New Hampshire and was accepted into the dietetic intern program at Keene State College, where she gained practical experience in the clinical, community, and food services fields of dietetics. Her special areas of interest are in diabetes education, geriatric nutrition, and promoting local farms and foods. Welcome, Laura.
Thank you. Thank you, Bev. Thank you, Karen. And thank you to everybody that's participating today. I hear there's a huge turnout, which is a real positive thing. And I guess that means there's a lot of enthusiasm for setting goals in 2021. So thanks again. So I'm going to start with why January is such a great time to start goals or set goals. And January itself is the beginning of the year, New Year's month. And January comes from the word Janus, which is the name of a Roman god who's in charge of beginnings and endings. And most people, or a lot of people who are making those resolutions, they want to put an end to undesirable type of habits that might have been happening over the past year. And they want to create new ones that are more beneficial in the years to come. So New Year's resolutions are very popular. They estimate anywhere from 40% to 70% of Americans will make New Year's resolutions. However, only less than half are still working towards those resolutions 6 months later. So what we want to know is, how do you get yourself in that group that is going to be successful with your New Year's resolutions? And what they found was, among that population of people that are successful, there were 3 big predictors of success. And the first one was the person's confidence in being able to make a change. The second one was having the skills that are necessary in order to make that change happen. And most importantly is people have to be ready. And a lot of people will say, "Oh yeah, I'm ready. You know, I've made goals before. This is no problem." But you really have to look deep and think about: Are you ready to make the? Are you ready to put forth the energy and effort at this time in your life to make a change? So, as you probably have guessed, the top New Year's resolutions usually involve diet and exercise. And these two aspects are called lifestyle changes. Now, lifestyle changes or lifestyle goals, are among the most difficult goals to be successful with. And the reason is lifestyle goals require a change in routine and comfort zones. And these, because of this, the aspect of the comfort zone in particular, it's very difficult. And lifestyle goals require a lot of internal motivation. So, something to think about if anyone out there is thinking of setting some goals this year, is before you choose a lifestyle goal, it's important to do some real mental homework, which is self-reflection. And self-reflection is getting to know yourself. It's not like the things you want to do in life. Self-reflection is, why do you act the way you do? Why do you think the way you do? Why do you feel the way you do? So it's getting to know yourself. And this reflection needs to be honest. And remember that no one's hearing your conversation with yourself. You're the only one. So there's no reason not to be honest with what you're asking yourself and what your answers are, because that is what eventually is going to help you be successful. So here are some questions just to start with. The first one is, why are you picking this goal, and what is your motivation? Now, motivation, a lot of times we use it as on a scale from 1 to 10. We want to see that motivation be up high, 8, 9, 10. And a lot of people will start off with, "Oh yeah, I'm highly motivated, I'm a 10. But again, that's just talk. A 10 means that person is going to put forth a lot of energy and a lot of effort. So again, it's trying to bridge that gap between what we say and what we're really going to do. So there's two types of goals. There's short-term and long-term. Short-term goals usually have a set endpoint. It could be a wedding, well, not during this pandemic, but it could be a wedding, a reunion, a vacation, something, or actually, some people just like to set goals with diets. There's like a Whole30 diet, which that is 30 days. So they have an endpoint. So short-term goals are relatively easy. There's a high degree of success, and people generally meet the goal, and you get a lot of confidence out of it. And so why is that? And as you can guess, it's because short-term goals have an end point. This end point is usually a shorter period of time. It could be weeks or it could be months. And the goal ends with the event. The wedding occurs, the reunion occurs, you went on vacation, and it's over. It's done. So it's kind of like that carrot on a stick. Most of us can do anything in a short period of time. So the downside of those short-term goals is that once that event occurs, most people revert back to their previous habits. So again, that's where that self-reflection comes in. If you've already talked to yourself, maybe you've made the decision, that that's okay. After the vacation's over, I'm going to go back. And sorry, I was reading that little box. So after the event occurs, you've already said that's enough energy, that's enough effort. I'm going to go back to my previous life. This is just too tough a lot of times, or isn't what I want. The important thing is that you've had that conversation and that you don't think of yourself as a failure. Other people will say, hey, this was pretty good. Look what I accomplished. And they then set another short-term goal so that they can keep going. And basically, you want to piggyback on your success. So those are short-term goals. Now, long-term goals are completely different. This is where most people struggle. And long-term goals usually come about as a result of a new medical diagnosis. Let's pretend been healthy all your life, all of a sudden you have a diagnosis of diabetes or high blood pressure or some other cardiovascular disease, something. And your doctor is saying, well, it's time to make a change. You got to change what you're eating. You got to change some aspect of your lifestyle, get more activity. So if that's the case, and that is something that you want to embark on, this long-term goal, it's really important to do a lot of self-reflection. And the main thing is, will you be willing to commit to this process? And this process, unlike a short-term goal, doesn't have an end point. That end point is the end of life, basically, because it's going to, it's something that the process is going to be measured in years and decades for the rest of your life. So it's very long-term. So when we're committing to a long-term goal, there's a lot of things to consider. So the first one, and the reason I'm bringing this up is I've seen too much failure, good intentions, and it's just, we don't need. I think with more structure and thought and more tools and skills, I think people could find success more easily and feel really good about it. But without that self-reflection and getting to know yourself, the chances for success are pretty slim with these long-term goals. So the first thing to consider, and it's a big one, it involves a lot, is what are personal or social or family or financial issues? What are things that are going on in your life that can interfere with your ability to carry out the goal? And that's a big mouthful, all right? You can take each one separately. Personal means, do you tend to give up easily? What do you like? Do you stick with things? Do you roll with the punches? Or do you try something that doesn't work and you just quit? Social. Do you have social support? Do you have somebody to help you? Family is family in crisis all the time, and you're the go-to person that has to work things out for everybody else. Finances, how are the finances? If that's a stress factor, all these things, if they're big issues in your life, sometimes it's not good to put another change, especially a lifestyle change, on top of them. The second one is, what is your tolerance to stress? And for example, a lot of people eat when they are under stress. And as you can imagine, that makes quite a challenge for someone who set a weight loss goal. So if eating is a coping mechanism, then you have to ask yourself, am I willing to maybe learn some different stress management techniques and find other ways to cope with stress? The goal here with all goals, the first goal is being successful. You want to feel successful because that brings confidence. Now, the last one is the one that sabotages goals all the time, particularly diet goals. And that is, are there behaviors or emotions that are at the root of unhealthy behaviors? So this is going back. It can be present, behaviors or emotions, or it can go all the way back to childhood. It's really important to deal with these first if you want to be successful long term. And age doesn't matter. You can be starting on this self-reflection and this journey at 20, or you can start in your 70s. But these things have to be dealt with. And so, as you know, some people may choose to do that before the goal. Other people may be working on it alongside of a long-term goal. But an example of that is, I think everybody can relate to, is emotion is tightly associated with eating behavior. So these are really tough questions, but they're very necessary in order to have success. Otherwise, our intentions are just superficial. And that could be just fine for people. Maybe they just want to try something out. And if it works, it works. And they really don't have that much invested. And it's not important. In case of medical diagnoses, maybe taking medication is just fine. It's better than having to go through all these things to actually change a diet and lifestyle, diet or physical activity. So, but again, we need to have this mental conversation first. So if it took the entire month of January just to get to know yourself, that's worth it, and that's a success. So another thing that this self-reflection does, when we're honest about it, it helps us identify barriers and challenges that are going to interfere with our success. Because once these challenges or barriers are identified, then we can deal with them. We can make a plan. But without that, we're just basically working in the dark, right? You don't know how to address the things that are going to come up. So at the end of this reflection, then you have to do what's called a gut check. And a gut check is, after all this talk with yourself and really thinking about the goal, thinking about what your priorities are for your life, is, do you really want to do it? And basically what this says is, are you ready for it? Are you ready to accept those challenges? Are you ready for the effort and the energy? And some people aren't, and that's okay. You may not be ready yet, but maybe in a year or two, you'll be ready. So that's really what it comes down to. So I'm just wondering if there's any questions now or anything like that. Should I keep going?
Yep, no questions in the chat at this time, Laurie.
Okay. All right, so let's say you did your gut check, you did your self-reflection, and now you're ready. This is one thing that I know Jeannie's going to put up in the box. How do we set a goal that will give us the best chance of being successful? And that is using a tool called the SMART rule, or the SMART method, or the SMART goal. And that's SMART. There are others, but there's only 5 letters to this one. And so it's pretty easy to work with. So a SMART goal, the S stands for specific. That means the goal is going to be detailed. M is for measurable. There's going to be some aspect of the goal that is going to involve some numbers. A is achievable, right? Why set a goal if it's not going to be achievable? There's no point in that. And R is relevant. And this is real important because we want the goal to be relevant to the main issue that you're trying to address. And T is having some sort of time limit or time boundary. And what this does is it holds someone accountable. And it also sets a time period for which that goal has to be achieved. So let's start the process with something, since I'm a nutritionist, with the goal of eating a healthier diet. That's a real common one. Everybody always says, when I ask what's your goal, I want to eat a healthier diet. Okay, great. How are you going to do that? That's when the blank book comes up. Because that type of a goal is great for an overarching goal, but it's just too vague. It doesn't give us enough information of how we are going to go about achieving that goal. So what the SMART tool does is it helps us break it down into little chunks so that we can be successful and we can develop new habits. So if we want to eat healthier, there's a tool that everybody hates in trying to figure out what aspect of the diet are we going to address. And that tool is a food log. Now you can either use paper or you can use an app on your smartphone. It doesn't matter. But it's really important. And what it does is it highlights potential areas in your current eating pattern that might be good places to start to make changes. And another thing that's even more important is a food log separates fantasy from reality. And I'll just use vegetables because that's something that everybody associates with dietitians. Is everybody will say, I shouldn't say everybody, most people will say, oh, I love vegetables. I eat salads all the time, every single day. Well, when you come down to that food log, you might actually see that, yes, you may like vegetables, but you haven't eaten them in the past week, or the last time you had a salad was 2 weeks ago. So this food log really brings reality in. And reality is what we need if we're going to set realistic goals and be successful. So how do we do this? Okay. I'm sure some of you have done this before, and some of you maybe like it. People do, some people don't. So what you do is you write everything down that you've ate or drank for 2 or 3 days. Some people say 7, but I don't think most people have that type of discipline. So 2 or 3 days is fine. And it's important when you write down this information that you're honest with yourself. Again, if every night you're having brownies and ice cream after dinner, write it down. Remember, no one's going to see this. It's just for you. But so it'll help you see, oh, well, maybe that's leading to my weight gain, or no, it looks like I didn't have any whole grains or vegetables or any protein for the past 2 days. It gives you information. Estimating amounts is really important. I've seen a cup when asking people how much they ate, and they say, oh, just a cup. And that cup, I don't know if you can see it, could be this size, a gigantic bowl, or it could be just a few, like a few tablespoons. So it's important to get a real handle on what you're exactly eating and how much. And so you can use measuring spoons, you can use your hand method, whatever it takes, just for a couple days. And then the most important thing is look at what you wrote down. It doesn't help to have a beautiful food log, 7 whole days worth, and you never looked at it. So writing down 2 or 3 days, look back at it and evaluate it. And this is where you find a place to start. You can look at what you ate, look at the recommended intakes, and then decide where your goal is going to be. Pick a food group that you need to improve upon. Maybe there's not any food group. Maybe your diet is following all the recommendations, you're fine. Then you might switch over to physical activity. So either way, it's important to start your goal, to make your goal, and make it realistic. So in the concept of eating a healthier diet, if a person is lactose intolerant, you're probably not going to want to write a goal that says you're planning to increase the dairy foods in your diet. And I don't mean that to be disrespectful, that does happen. So it's really important that that's where that self-reflection and that real thinking comes in, because the goal is to be successful. So when these come on, okay, I didn't know if I need to address those, Jeannie.
Nope, no questions in the chat at this time. I just put
Okay.
a note in there that if folks have questions, you can certainly
Okay.
type them in the chat and Laurie will address them.
All right, so let's use our SMART goal, okay? We wanted to have a healthier diet, right? Too vague. So let's say you looked at your food log and you said, oh, I actually don't eat the recommended vegetable amount. I'm just using vegetables. And so you say, okay, I want to eat more vegetables. That's going to be my goal. Well, again, it's pretty vague, right? How are you going to eat more vegetables? How are you going to incorporate that? So remember, going back to the first thing, is your goal reasonable? If you absolutely hate vegetables, then pick something else. But remember, you want to be successful. There's no right or wrong here. But say you like vegetables, okay, you're good. So we'll keep going. So now we're going to use the SMART tool, S. Let's be specific. All right, so after thinking about it, you said, I am going to add 1 serving of vegetable to my dinner. Say, okay, well, some people, well, actually, that's okay. Let's go on to M, measurable. That's where it comes in. What's a serving? Are you going to add a 1/2 cup? That's the serving of cooked vegetables, 1/2 cup. If you're using My Plate, it's going to be 1/2 of your plate is going to be vegetables. Let's say that you don't like numbers, and let's say you don't even like vegetables, but you're willing to try. You're determined to do this. Just put a vegetable on the plate. That's good enough. But that's where the measurement can come in. Also, you want to add a vegetable dinner. Another measurement is how many dinners. This is where you got to think about it. Okay, what's reasonable? Let's pretend you're not eating any vegetables right now at all, which is not unreasonable. That can happen. And so you're at 0. Saying that you're going to add a vegetable to dinner every single night for 7 dinners, that's probably setting you up for failure. So we want to set you up for success. So start low. It can be 1 dinner. It could be 3. But put a number to it, because that's something you can measure.
Laurie, there's a question in the chat. Where do you find the recommended amount is the question.
You can go to ChooseMyPlate.gov or just myplate.gov. Is that a problem with my phone ringing? Yeah, ChooseMyPlate.gov. G-O-V, government site. And they will tell you. So achievable, A, real important. Again, you're going to go back to self-reflection. I'm going to throw a lot of things out there. None of them may apply to you, but they're just an example. Is eating a vegetable with dinner achievable? So, for example, what's available in the house now? Does a person have transportation to be able to go buy groceries? Is your transportation dependent on somebody else? Is somebody else cooking you food and that person hates vegetables and is never going to serve them to you? What are your cooking skills like? Do you know how to cook vegetables? Is that kind of a barrier because you don't have the confidence? Is there kitchen equipment to be able to cook vegetables? What about physical ability? Some people have a really hard time standing up and preparing, cutting and preparing and then cooking. If some of those cases, they're they're barriers, but we can break through those, right? Let's call them more challenges. We just buy ready-made vegetables, something that you can pick up at the store. And then another one, again, behavior comes in. You have to think about your behavior. Your freezer could be filled with vegetables. Frozen vegetables in your pantry could be filled with canned, or your refrigerator with fresh, but you just don't think of it. You're going to be thinking of the meat portion. You're going to be thinking of the starch, and you're going to that's good enough. Your life is busy. You're not thinking of the vegetable. So having this goal be achievable is kind of where some tips will come in, some reminders. It's going to be problem solving. How are you going to remember to put that vegetable? How are you going to get past the fact that you can't cook? Is ready-made okay? So achievable, very important. Relevant. Is this goal of vegetables relevant to our larger goal of eating a healthier diet? Well, yes, it is, right? You get a new diagnosis. Vegetables are going to play into every single medical diagnosis, not every single one. There's quite a few where you want to temper it a bit, but for diabetes, for high blood pressure, for high cholesterol, vegetables are going to be a big part of a food solution. So yes, it's relevant in this case. Let me give you an example of something that's not relevant. No, let me give you one more that is relevant. Let's say someone's not quite ready to put the vegetable on the plate, but they're perfectly ready to clean their pantry and get an inventory of what vegetables are there. That's a perfectly acceptable goal. You need to find out what you have, what you like, and then you can go shopping. What's not relevant is saying, okay, I'm going to walk 5 more minutes each day. And this is real. I am not making up any of this. And so you have to think about, well, is that getting me to a healthier diet? It's getting me to a healthier physiology, but it doesn't really address the diet. Another one is starting a garden. That's a great idea, is grow your own vegetables. But it's winter now in New Hampshire, and it's going to be about 7 months before you pick your first green. So what are you going to do in those 7 months? You're doing nothing towards the big goal. So really want to make it relevant.
Laurie, there's another question. Does it matter if fruits or vegetables are fresh, canned, or frozen?
For vegetables, no difference. For fruits, you want to go with fresh. And this is why. The canned fruits, even if it's in its own juice without sugar, they've been processed. And so their vitamins are basically gone. So canned fruit is a great dessert. There is some fiber, a little bit of fiber left in it. It certainly beats brownies and ice cream. But to get the nutrition out of the fruit, it does need to be eaten fresh. So the last one is T for time bound. And so that means let's set a time limit. So you've decided you're going to add a vegetable to 3 dinners next week. So that's your time bound, is next week you're going to start your goal and you're giving yourself 1 week. And so that's good. That's your time bound. That's your SMART goal. So it's going to sound like I will add 1 vegetable to 3 dinners next week. And it's good. Now, some people like to get more detailed. And so they'll say, okay, I happen to like carrots and string beans. So I'm going to use carrots and string beans for my 3 dinners. That's great. Some people are going to say, I'm going to have a cup of my carrots at each one. So you can get as detailed as you want. Don't go overboard though. Or you can just stay general and give yourself that flexibility. So the next step is actually what I think is the most important to avert failure and to help you be more successful. And that is to pre-troubleshoot. That means look at all the things that can go wrong next week after, that you've set this goal for. And so some examples are, what does your next week look like? Is it really busy? Are you away from home every single day practically? Those aren't insurmountable obstacles. Those are just challenges. And again, with self-reflection, you problem solve and you troubleshoot. So yes, okay, I'm going to be out I'm going to be eating out. How about that? So can I check the menu first? Can I order a vegetable? We're eating pizza. We always eat pizzas 3 nights a week. Great. Well, is there a salad you can order with that? So there are things to do. If you know you're going to be out every single night, which of course during the pandemic, this is probably not applicable to anybody. But when the pandemic ends, if you're out every single night, maybe your vegetable needs to be at lunch or, heaven forbid, in the morning with breakfast. So it's actually a great way to start. So you can back it up a bit. So the key is identify, troubleshoot, identify some bumps, make a plan, and then modify. And move on. Always move on. The important thing is, another thing to look at, final thing to look at is if you say, okay, next week's not good, that's fine. I'm going to start. But if you notice the next week isn't fine either, and then the next week's not good either, well, that's kind of a message to yourself that says you're not ready or you need to choose a different goal. And that's okay. Because the idea is to take that big goal of eating healthier, break it down into pieces using the SMART tool, which is a nice guide, and being successful, because being successful will help build confidence. It grows your skills and tools. It expands your comfort zone. We can't change if we stay in our comfort zone.
So Laurie, there's another question in the chat. How would you classify greens? For example, is lettuce a vegetable?
Yes, the vegetable. So that's basically what I wanted to talk about today, about goal setting and setting yourself up for success. It's a lot more work for a long-term goal, but it's well worth it because we're talking about your health. And I'm sure that many of you have set goals before, maybe many goals, and I'm sure you have a lot of experience with what worked for you and what didn't work for you. And that would be great to share too. So thank you very much. I appreciate
Laurie, thank you. Oh, there's one more question before Bev closes us out. Is there a difference between, so it says, is there a difference between lettuce for nutrition value? I think folks are interested in maybe the different classifications of greens and which maybe have more health benefits, or the different types of lettuce.
Iceberg lettuce has the lowest nutritional value, but it's great for crunch, right? So some people that are a little more timid about branching out to spinach or kale or collards or something like that to put, or the darker greens, the romaine, the red leaf, the green leaf. If they're a little more timid about putting that in, you can always mix your iceberg lettuce with the more nutritious, darker leafy greens. And that's a way to kind of like work your way in so that you're still getting the nutrition, but you still have that favorite, which is the iceberg lettuce. And yes, there's a lot of differences in greens themselves, but as they say, the darker the better in terms of lettuces. But they're all good. You know what I mean? A vegetable is better than no vegetable.
That's wonderful. Laurie, thank you so much. Bev, would you, sorry, every time I go to close this out or have Bev close this out, another question pops in. So another question, I have found that keeping a written log of what I'm doing towards my goal is really helpful. Example, I simply keep a calendar and record my exercise regimen on it as done. So I guess that was more of a comment than a question. And then another person said, in your experience, what are some small goals you have seen be successful for some folks, like diet, exercise, meditation? Can you provide an example of some small goals that you have seen be successful?
Sure. Well, getting back to that log that one person commented on, the studies show that if you write it down, it holds you accountable and it works. That's another characteristic of successful people: writing it down, documenting. Small goals, sure. Any short-term goal, any diet. Of course, I hear a lot about diets. So any diet that you choose, generally for 30 days, 60 days, they're going to be successful. Then you have a major drop off after that. So short-term goals, yeah, they're getting out and walking 1 day a week. Those are quite easy and successful. The trick is the transition from the short term to the long term.
Thank you, Laurie. I also, this is Bev. There's an app out there. There's a website called MyFitnessPal, and it's free. And it gives you you can log in what you eat, and it calculates the calories and so forth. And you can log in whatever exercise you might have done for the day. And so it really kind of keeps you accountable for all of those. Oh, I just had 3 crackers. I mean, just kind